Okay, I am recording a video for my kids, and this is some of the stuff that I talk about in my home with my kids. First thing, I didn't write this down exactly what I'm going to say, but I'm just going to try to talk about these topics. So if I make mistakes, I apologize. I'll do the best I can. So the first thing that I kind of want to distinguish between is pleasure and happiness. And these are not, a thing where like pleasure is bad and happiness is good. No, pleasure can be good and happiness can be good. And the difference though is a lot of times one can be at the expense of the other. Sometimes pleasure now can cost us happiness later. So it's really helpful in life to learn when to avoid types of pleasure that can cost us happiness later. So it's kind of like a little bit like thinking of a path. So here I drew, let's say you're right here, you're this red dot right here, and you're going to make a decision in your life, and this is a path that will lead to really happy lifestyle. And there's certain decisions that you can make that'll lead to a really happy lifestyle. Well, a lot of the things that could jeopardize this happiness are things that would bring you pleasure short term. Now remember, not all pleasure is bad, but it's a useful thing to try to identify in your life what kinds of pleasure will cost you long-term happiness. So, for example, a short-term pleasure thing that might cost you long-term happiness would be stealing something. It might be a lot of fun to own something at the store. But if you were to go to the store and just steal that thing, then that might be exciting for you to have that thing that you wanted, but long-term, if you don't have some sort of mental disorder or you were raised a certain way, you might end up feeling, hey guys, I'm trying to record, can you be a little bit more quiet?
Okay.
Thank you. You might end up feeling really guilty about that later and feeling regret and guilt. And so what maybe short-term gave you a spike in pleasure, long-term would decrease your happiness trajectory. And so whereas short-term maybe you felt really high pleasure, but long-term you end up on this path that would maybe lead you somewhere down here ultimately. Remember, this doesn't stop it. This isn't the end here. This goes on for potentially forever, depending on your belief. I mean, I believe, according to my belief system, I think this goes on forever. So it's not like you arrive at happiness. You're on the path for greater happiness and a better conscience, or you're on the path towards less happiness. So anyway, another point in this path thing is to understand that someone's not a bad person if they make a decision that leads to less happiness. It maybe just means that some of the decisions they made maybe didn't lead to greater happiness. And so, for example, maybe they suffer from an addiction now, or they have a lot of guilt. Another thing that's important to understand is that it's not that simple of just like, oh, you made good decisions, so now you're happy, or you made bad decisions, and now you're miserable. People that make really good decisions can go through times in their lives, or even on this earth life, where they are unhappy based on what they're focusing on. So anyway, it's kind of a complicated thing. I'm not going to be able to summarize all of happiness, but the general idea is that for the most part, if you live your life in a way where you're trying to help other people and do good things and do what you feel is right, you're more likely to be happy. And if you do things that maybe give you short-term pleasure, that can be long-term lead to less happiness. It's kind of a good way to think of it that way. This is recording. Look.
Oh.
Yeah. See.
Oh, on the camera it was.
You're right. That's not recording.
I was so confused.
So the last idea here, I really feel like I didn't do a good enough job with this path thing. I guess in summary, if you're going to try to create patterns in your life early on that are going to lead you to greater happiness later on, because it's easy to make changes early in your life. But if you get in a habit of, let's say, lying and stealing and cheating and being immoral and doing those kinds of things, later on down your life, it's way harder to change. Look at the difference here on this red line. That's a huge difference. But early in your life, it's pretty easy to make these kinds of course changes. And that sets you on a course for your life. This path is the path of happiness. And this path down here is a path of misery. And short term, though, they have some pleasure in it. But in the end, it doesn't lead that way. I just talked to somebody the other day who, yeah, you're pointing at a picture. I have a picture of Jesus there. Later on in your life, you may end up really regretting some of the things that you said. I talked to somebody just the other day who they said that when they were younger, they did a lot of drugs, and they said they went to a lot of places that are people do immoral things. I've got kids in the background here, if you know what I mean. And they said it brought them a lot of pleasure at that time in their life, but now they were very sad and very miserable and regretted making the decisions that they made. They didn't have the family. They didn't feel good about the way they lived their lives. They felt really guilty and unhappy. Now their life was over, and it's a sad thing. They started on this path that kind of led them to unhappiness. That doesn't mean they're a terrible, bad person or anything. It's just sad that they haven't had that opportunity. So now the ability for them to change is going to be really hard. Lots of time and energy. It'd be almost like, the distance here is almost kind of like the distance here. Like this is like time as it goes outward. So it'd almost be like that much more time to try to correct things, and it's really difficult. Okay, so lastly here is the idea of an investment. So in your life, you'll have opportunities to make different kinds of investments. You can invest your energy and your time.
If you don't know what that means, so I'll tell you.
Yeah. To invest something is like to put something into it. You can invest money, you can invest time and energy, you can invest life, you can invest anything you want. So, money.
Like what he did when he was little.
Yeah, so I put my...
$10,000.
I put... Can you let me talk, please? All right. So, for example, I invested my time and energy into going to college with the hope that I would get a return, a yield of a good career that would last me a long time. Everything you do is some sort of investment. Even choosing to have these wonderful kids my wife and I have. My wife was pregnant for 9 months. And she put in a lot. She's doing it, and it was a very uncomfortable time, and it cost money, and it cost a lot of energy and things like that. But we get a lot of yield, a lot of joy from the kids, having the kids in our lives, not only while they're young, but also as they get older and throughout their lives. So that's an investment that has a great yield later on in life, hopefully. In your life, some of the things that I've found are good to invest a little bit of time in each day is spiritual things, spending a little bit of time praying or studying the scriptures, just a little bit of time each day. And that is a little bit of a time and energy investment, but I found over a long period of time in my life, that's brought me a lot of joy in my life. Serving as a missionary was another thing. I invested 2 years of my life, and the yield from that has been tremendous.
I don't think anyone who's watching knows what
that's okay. Doesn't matter. Just things I did in my life. Going to college and working on my doctorate degree. That was another investment, and I believe that someday it'll have a great yield. And anyway, all these things are that way. So it takes some short-term work and dedication for a long-term benefit.
Like what I'm doing.
As opposed to...
I'm putting in my time to go outside and play. Short-term
pleasure at the expense of long-term happiness. So pleasure can be wonderful, but not when it's at the expense of longer-term happiness. So if you're going to enjoy some pleasure, make sure that it doesn't ruin things for you later on down the line and create some habits or patterns that can be damaging to you and lead you on a path that's not happy. I hope this is helpful for people.